Hello, hello, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Excuse me. And I'm not choking on my words, although I may seem to be. So let's get right on with what we want to do this evening for sure. I'm so glad that you're here. I'd love to have you say hello in the chat. And we're going to get started in just couple of minutes, just give time for everybody to remember it was 6 o'clock and that we are ready to roll. Tonight we're going to talk about something very important, and that's how to clearly know whether something is emotionally abusive or not. And we need to do that because we tend to downplay some of these things. We tend to not really fully engage and embrace the fact that something happened and it was emotional abuse. We may make excuses, we may justify somebody's behavior, we may rationalize their behavior, but it doesn't matter because it landed on us as emotional abuse, and that's a big deal. So I hope that as we're going through this evening's time together, that you think about, wow, what did happen to me? Because when we're children, things happen and we don't take them in the same way. So thinking about that, so please say hello and let me know that you're here and who's here so that I can welcome you. Hi, Anya. Lovely. Glad to see her. Hello, she says to everyone. I'm sure you can read that, so that's great. I'm glad that you're joining me. And everybody else as well. So I appreciate it when you say hello so that I know you're there. And I've had a very busy day. I've been talking most of the day, so if I sound a little bit quiet tonight, it's because my voice has been very busy today. And hi, Purple Belt. Nice to see you as well. Returning visitors. I love that. Always love to see new people. Really happy to see returning people because it means you found something of value when you were here before and you wanted to join in. And as usual, I invite you to tell your friends about this because everybody needs to know this information for themselves or to help a friend or a family member or to understand your family and what actually may have happened that people are just not conscious of, or not deeply conscious of at any rate. So want to talk about that as well. So let's just jump in now. We've waited our 2 minutes and let people come on board. So tonight, talking about clearly seeing signs of emotional abuse, recognizing what is emotional abuse. And, you know, there are many things that are part of it. And so I'm just going to mention a few of them, and I want you to be very interactive tonight. If there's something that you need to ask a question about or whatever, just do that right when you need to, because this is a very important conversation. Don't want to get too far ahead of the conversation. So if you have a question, let's stop and answer that. So what are some of the things that are involved in verbal abuse? Well, confinement. Somebody doesn't want you to go anywhere, wants to keep you where they can see you, wants to know where you are every minute. Or isolation. They want to keep you away from other people. They don't want you to have the ability to talk to others. And what are they afraid of? Well, of course, they're afraid that you will tell them that you're being abused, but they may also just be wanting to make sure that they control every interaction that you have. So you may be confined. And of course, there's appropriate confinement when we're little children, but this has to be looked at in depth tonight. And verbal assault and verbal abuse is part of emotional abuse. When people use language that puts you down or gives you nicknames or calls you names to make you feel small or humiliated, And, you know, the horrible thing about dealing with hijackals, although not all emotional abusers are hijackals, the horrible thing about dealing with a hijackal is if you say, I don't like to be called that, they'll call you it more, and they'll tell you that you just can't take a joke or you're too sensitive. And you cannot stand for emotional abuse. That's why I'm doing the program tonight, because it's important to know what they are. So confinement and isolation and verbal assault, verbal abuse, very, very damaging to our self-esteem when we're little, because we're looking to those giants to define us. And if our parents told us, you know, well, you're a loser, or you're not worth anything, or I could just leave you here, you know, all the things that absolutely scare a child, that's emotional abuse. Hi, Kristen. Hi, Alchemy. Welcome. It's important for us to recognize that those things that people do to kids, and they used to do it, I guess when my children were young, I was more sensitive and aware of what's going on. But, you know, they would do things that made the children cry. They would do the things that made the children afraid, and then they'd laugh at the children. And we see far too much of that on YouTube and Facebook. Like, I cannot believe some of the stuff that we see on Facebook, that people have their cameras up taking pictures of what their children do that is really humiliating to the child. And those things stick around. But who thinks that's amusing? You know, many people don't even think of it as emotional abuse, and yet it is, because it's humiliating. Another way of emotionally abusing someone is to be intimidating all the time. Well, I'll show you. You know, I can take it away. I brought you into this world and I can take you out. You know, things like that that people say to their children. Now, we're not even getting to the adult part yet, but people say things like that to their children. Did any of you have that said to you? That you were intimidated? They always kept you on the edge of your seat. You didn't know whether you were going to be okay or not okay, live or die, be safe, be unsafe. They always threatening, because that's emotional abuse. And there's this thing called infantilization, and that's mostly when we are older. But emotional abuse is when someone continually parents you as if you need a parent, and that you couldn't possibly do anything without that. I had this couple come in years ago, and the woman was a medical doctor and the man was an entrepreneur, had done quite well. They had a baby, and he treated her so disdainfully. He said, you know, I don't even know if I'm safe to leave the baby with her. And like, I was, what? This woman holds people's lives in her hands, and you don't think that your child is safe with her? And he had infantilized her. So here she was out in the world being this phenomenal medical person, helping so many people, you know, helping people give birth, helping people stay alive, helping people die, whatever she was doing. And somehow, because of her early life, and it's not somehow, I know exactly how, of course, because I worked with them, but through her early life, she accepted that she wasn't very good at things and that she needed someone to tell her what to do. And he had come along and told her what to do. And so he was complaining that he couldn't trust her and he always had to tell her what to do. And she was complaining that she felt so badly in the relationship and it was horrible and it was all emotionally abusive. We did get to the bottom of it. He didn't change much, but she did. And slowly we got somewhere in the middle, which was great. So I asked the question, did anybody have that in their childhood? And Mama Girl said, yes, my mom said that all the time. Yeah. And Kristen says, so how do you respond when they call you a nickname you've asked them not to? Well, if we're dealing with a parent, are we dealing with a hijackal, Kristen? Or maybe a hijackal parent. Who is it that's calling you a nickname you've asked them not to call you? And while you type that in there, I'll tell you that when I was 7 years old, I realized that my father not only thought of me as his little girl, but he also wanted me to be his little boy. You know, I had to go fishing and I had to go hunting and I had to do all these things. And I don't know what my 7-year-old brain was all about at that time, but of course my name is Roberta, and everybody called me Bobby. And at 7 years old, I pulled myself up on my highest person I could be, and I said, no, my name is Roberta, and I will not answer to that anymore, ever, 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 ever. I have that memory of doing that, and everybody was quite shocked. And most of them stopped calling me that. So a hijackal spouse, Kristen, well, first of all, don't answer if he calls you that and he's calling you. But secondly, simply use, I write about this, I talk about it all the time in Kaizen for Couples. You want to read the chapters on the personal weather report. Every single person, whether hijackal or not, you need to have the skill of delivering personal weather reports so that you can be assertive without being aggressive, that you can get your point across, you can set strong boundaries. The book's available at Amazon. You can buy it in print or you can buy it as a download. Kaizen for Couples, Kaizen for Couples. And learn how to do that. So here's what it would sound like, Kristen. You say, I prefer to be called such and such, and that's the name that I will answer to. And I'd like to be respected. Now, I'm sure you said something like that because you say, I've done that and I've told him I don't answer to that name. But as long as he thinks it provides any power, then he will keep doing it. So you just simply take the power out of it. If it's a name that is demeaning, you tell him that. If it's a name that is diminishing, you tell him that. And then simply don't get angry, don't get upset, just be assertive. I prefer to be called Kristen, and this name feels disrespectful to me, and I won't answer to it. And then don't. But don't get visibly upset. Just be neutral and strong. Okay? You're welcome. Because that's where we go sideways with the hijackal. I know, you want to go sideways. You want to get angry. You want to say, I'll show you, and how dare you, and all of that. But when you do that, they're getting a rise out of you. That's what they want. Now, I'm not saying your anger isn't justified. Of course it is. But there's a whole lot of strategy involved in being with the hijackal. If you're going to stay with them, you have to have some strategy. And strategically, you need to not get your knickers in a twist around them. Because when they think that they can push a button and you'll jump, you're going to have your button pushed way, way, way too often. Alchemy said, my father kept me intimidated and afraid. That's sad. I'm sorry that happened to you. That was a parenting style, particularly for fathers, was a leftover from the 40s and 50s. Kristen said, I feel like I've got to have a poker face just to be level. Yeah, you do have to train yourself in order to be benign and neutral. And preferably pleasant, because if you look like you're miserable or you look like you're sad or angry, they still read it as a win. So all the shoring up has to come from within. You have to shore yourself up within. I know who I am. I know what my values are. I know what my vision for my life is. I know what my beliefs are, and I know how I'm going to live in alignment with all those things. And then you do it because it's who you are. What the hijackal does is what they do. But what I do has to be in alignment with who I want to be. Many times that shows up. Someone will have had an abusive mother or father, and then they'll write to me and they'll say, well, that person is dying, and should I go to the funeral? What should I do? I haven't talked to them for years. And the question comes down to, and I always put it in the response, the question is, who are you? Whoever they were, whatever they did, any of that stands. But who are you right now? If you're a person who has dismissed that, are good with that, and would have no regrets by not going to the funeral, then you don't go to the funeral. If you would go and you would pay your respects and leave early, who are you? It's not who were they. Who are you, and what can you live with without regret? So very important. So we have all of these pieces that emotional abuse is anything that diminishes our sense of identity or dignity or self-worth or self-esteem or self-confidence. And difficult people, particularly hijackals, poke at that all the time. They want to diminish you. They want to make you less than. They want to take away from you. Hijackals don't add to you except in the love bombing phase. So emotional abuse is all these things that take you off your center. And I don't mean that you can't hold on to your center. I'm meaning that when you're little, that these things happen and they give you a sense of power, no power, and it gets into the deepest core of your being. And then as you're growing and your brain is developing, you don't go back and figure those things out. You've got new fish to fry, you have new things to figure out. And so you keep on going, trying to figure those things out. Pretty soon you have a huge pile of stuff to figure out that with your different ages and stages in brain development, you haven't gone back to figure out. And that's what begins to develop who you are. So emotional abuse can shape you. And a lot of what I try to help my clients do, and they tell me that they get there, so I guess it's not a try situation. But what we want to do is to come to a place where we know ourselves so well, and we have examined all those early relationships in our lives to see where we got the pieces that we're having trouble with now, where certain things have become acceptable to us and we didn't even think them through. It's because they were acceptable to us when we were 1.5 and we didn't have a language. And so we just thought that's the way the world is, that's the way the world works, that's what I have to do to keep the giants happy, then they'll feed me and they won't leave me alone. And so we take it on and we take it in, and it can be very emotionally abusive. And we have to think about it, because as we're proceeding, we're growing and doing and learning and all. As we're proceeding, we don't go back and figure out what happened to us. We just keep going forward. And as that becomes the fabric of who we are, we may not have ever realized that this is not okay. It's just the way it was at my house. Do you know, and certain things are really obvious. So I'll tell you a little story about my life. When I was 9, I was being sexually abused by the babysitter, who was a 17-year-old son of the people next door. And it had happened a few times, and he was babysitting this one night, and we heard my parents' car come in the driveway, and I was so relieved because he was just about to teach me where babies come from. And so my parents came in, and of course he took his money and hightailed it. And I decided to tell my parents. Now, I've written about this. I slept on a cot next to my parents' bed. That's another whole story. But I slept there, 9 years old. So my parents came in, and they're leaning against the bed, talking down to me on the cot, and I told them what had happened. And my mother's response, remember, both my parents were hijackals. My mother's response was, well, I said, this happened to me, and she said, well, it couldn't possibly have happened to you because 9-year-old children don't know about those things. So I was a pretty smart 9-year-old, and I remember distinctly saying to her, well, then it must be happening to me because I'm 9 years old and I know. And my mother got really angry, and my father said nothing. Now, there was sexual abuse that happened because of the neighbor's son. But the neighbors, the relationship my parents had with the neighbors was far more important to them than their relationship with me. So not only did there have the occurrence of sexual abuse, but by telling my parents and having them make me wrong and deny me was emotional abuse. You see how it got compounded. Now, just to tell you a little bit about that story, when I was 40 years old, I went to my parents and I said, I want to talk about this that happened. And I told the whole story. And my father said, I've never heard of that before. And my mother said, well, I was right. 9-year-old children don't know about those things, so you had to be lying. See, hijackals don't change. So this is emotional abuse. And if we haven't worked through those things, then they're there lurking for us at our dark moments, or our scary moments, or our uncertain moments. Anya said, and now emotional abuse feels bad and yet so familiar. Yes, but when it starts feeling bad and we care enough to say, I'm going to figure this out, then we get some help to go deeper and deeper and deeper. Find out where these things are lodged. Where did they get stuck? Where did they get planted in our young life? And then we can work them through. You know, that's the whole point of working with a professional, is to find the things that you can't see. Because a professional can see you from the outside and hear your story and then knows a lot about that. You know, somebody asked me one day in a bar, what do I do? And I told them what I did. And they said, oh, don't look at me. Don't read me. Don't be a psychologist around me. And I thought, oh, that's not going to work very well for my love life. So I came back the next week and someone asked me, what did I do? And I said, let me ask you a question first. And I said, do you have a car? He said, yeah. I said, what do you do when it breaks down? He said, well, I have a BMW. I take it to the BMW dealer. I said, why? Why don't you fix it yourself? And he said, well, I'm an attorney. I don't have time to learn to fix cars. That's what the BMW person does. I said, okay, ask me again what I do. So he asked me and I said, I'm a life mechanic. And that's what I used for the rest of the time if I ever was going out socially, because that's really what it is. It's finding out why what's not working isn't working and getting either fixing it or getting new parts. And that's what we do. And it's very worthwhile. I recommend that you don't go a moment longer with some of these things inside you, because the rest of your life can be so much freer when you've worked through things. So if you've had emotional abuse, this is important. So let me give you some things that you might think about. Okay, is there a person in your life who ever threatened violence or threatened to leave and leave you with nothing? That's emotional abuse. They want to keep you uncertain. Remember, one of the hallmarks of hijackals is keep people uncertain, in chaos, confused. So threatening keeps you on the edge of, will they, won't they, what do I need to do? So that's a form of emotional abuse. And as I said earlier, some people like to frighten people intentionally. They think it's very funny. And you see that on Facebook around children and even adults, where people jump out of boxes or cakes or something. This is all supposed to be so funny. But if you've been traumatized when you're young and somebody does that, that's emotionally abusive. It takes you through the trauma again. Or it could just by itself be emotionally abusive. Well, maybe somebody's made you afraid. Maybe in a relationship, someone has made you afraid that you'll be left with nothing. That they tell you that, well, you're just lucky I put up with you, because if I ever turfed you out of here, I wouldn't give you anything and I'd take the children and run. That's emotionally abusive. It's playing on your emotions. It is diminishing and dismissing and discounting and dragging you through the mud emotionally. And that is just not okay. But we have the opportunity of going back and seeing, did that happen to me? And if the answer is yes, then there is something you need to work through. May need to get a little help. Okay, what's another way that people are emotionally abusive? Well, they'll lie to you. They'll lie frequently. In fact, they think they're so smart if they're a hijackal that you don't know they're lying. And they could tell you anything and make it sound like the truth. They honestly believe that. But then they may also go the next step in emotional abuse and go and lie about you. That's awful. Has anybody had that experience where all of a sudden you hear that a story has been changed and now something is your fault, or it's been at your expense, or it's humiliating? One of the things that hijackals like to do is they like to get you into one of those moments where you're feeling really loved and taken care of for a moment, and you're having an intimate conversation, and maybe you share some secret, like, I'm afraid of the dark, or, I set the backyard on fire when I was a kid. And you think you're having this intimate moment, this one-on-one moment with your person, the person who is so dear to you. And then a week later, you're out for dinner with some friends, and all of a sudden they're saying, ha, yeah, and she's even afraid of the dark, right? Just use it to humiliate you. Use it to betray your confidence, to betray your vulnerability. That's emotional abuse. They're very good at spotting what will really matter to you, and then they take a skewer to it whenever they feel they need some power. So Alan Marfel said, what about when someone demands an apology after you told them about something they did that hurt you? Oh, we hear a lot about that these days. That is the twist, isn't it? That is the twist. When someone demands an apology from you after you've told them they hurt you. Well, the thing with a hijackal is they always have to be the winner. So therefore, if you say they hurt you, then they're going to come back with, well, you hurt me more, and therefore you should be apologizing to me. And at that moment, you go back to that personal weather report. I can't say it enough. Read Kaizen for Couples. You don't have to be in a couples relationship. It's all about communication and healthy relationships. But you have to go to that place where you can, without any tension, without any concern, and just say, that was not the conversation. The conversation I had was about my feelings and how I wanted that to be respected. And you don't let them get by with it. You don't argue with them, but you become a bit of a broken record saying what was so for you. This is why I brought it up. This is what is important to me. This is what I want. And you don't let them swallow you up whole and have you second guessing yourself and jumping back. Does that make sense, Alan Marfel? Purple Belt said, after I left my ex, I was so jumpy for a few months. Everybody is, I think. Every time my sons came into the room, even though he didn't hit. Well, of course, because you were waiting for a second shoe to fall all the time, right? It was always my fault. Everything, even when he did things he had me believe I had. Okay. Well, that's typical hijackal. They cannot possibly be wrong. They cannot possibly take responsibility or be accountable. So it has to be your fault. I mean, eventually the weather and the IRS and global warming will be your fault too if you stay with a hijackal long enough. Everything is going to be your fault. And of course, once you've been living with that for a while, you're just a little hypervigilant. Where's it coming? When's it coming? Where's it coming from? Who's it coming from? And it takes a long while to determine within yourself that you have taken yourself to safety. And I hope you did. I really do. Ali Marfel said, I began to open my heart to my dad about some memories from my childhood that caused me a lot of pain, and he pretty much denied the event, then later asked what I was sorry for. Yeah, well, he wasn't having any, was it? He wasn't going to be accountable or responsible or even interested. Great that he sat with you for a while, but there you were, looking for a father to be a father. A healthy father is what you wanted, a safe place where he would protect you. And then he didn't. And I'm sorry, that's awful when it happens. It is really awful. And he denies it because he can't take responsibility for it. Hijackals, or people with hijackal tendencies, they have a deep sense of shame that they absolutely never, 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 never admit, because things have happened to them when they're young. And so they are not having any more shame of any kind from anybody. And that seems like an example of that. Alan Marfel went on, he asked, is there anything you want to apologize to me for? Just like purple belts, right? Or, oh no, that's what you were talking about, Alan Marfel. Yes. Is there anything you want me to apologize to me for? And he didn't bring up anything, did he? He was looking to have you own the problem. Wow. And you said no, and then he got so offended. He talked about me to my mom, and she later told me how hurt he was by that. Boy, what a manipulative father was that guy being at that time. Was he like that all the time? Was this one of those lovely tender moments when you hoped that you had a real dad, a real good guy dad, and you let him in, and then he emotionally abused you? Oh, you went on. I refused to play that game with him. I wanted to see if he had any capacity to hold space for my pain. He doesn't. He failed the test. He sure did fail the test. He doesn't have capacity to hold the space, but he didn't even have capacity for entering into who owned the pain. And that is a lot of armor, a lot of armor pushing you away. And that's a very unsafe feeling, very unsafe to feel like you can't have an integrated conversation with your father. That, this person who's supposed to be mature and wiser and stronger and protective of me and all, that's what you came in believing about your parent, should be able to have a conversation with give and take in it, and honesty and safety and trust and reliability in it, and respect, and it didn't, because he had to be right. So sad, but so common. Purple Belt said, I learned to say to my mom or ex, I don't remember it that way. Perfect. Perfect. That's the place we have to come to. Be willing to make an assertive statement. Not aggressive, assertive. Oh, that's not the way I remembered it. No, that's not the way it felt in my body. No, those not the words I remember saying. Just become assertive. Just take up space and draw breath and know you can, and become assertive. So that's perfect, Purple Belt. Yes. Okay. Ellie Marfel said, we talked for 3 hours, then went in circles, landing nowhere, leaving me doubting my own memories and feeling like I'd hurt him after I decided it was the last talk of its kind. So sad. You really wanted your dad to be a good guy. You really hoped there was maturity there. You really hoped that maybe he saw that things had been less than wonderful, and you wanted him to comfort you. You wanted him to be the one who protected you. And he wasn't there for you. He didn't have that to give. And that's very hurtful, and it's emotionally abusive because of the nature of the parent-child relationship. Doesn't matter how old you are. It's because of that nature of that relationship. So these things that you're bringing up, all emotionally abusive, but somebody lies to you, that's really a big red flag. Even the tiniest lie, watch for it. If you're in a relationship, watch for a lie of any size, because people who lie in little ways often will lie in big ways. You don't want to be around people who lie. And you want to recognize that people who don't treat your reputation well, for no just cause except it makes them feel better to feel they have power over you, is emotionally abusing you. And you feel it because you get a gut feeling, don't you? You feel it in your heart. You feel it in your stomach. It hurts. And it produces anxiety. And it produces that empty feeling like, what? I just feel so alone and isolated. And that's the feeling of emotional abuse. So here's another way people emotionally abuse you is they withhold information, important information, or they lie about important information. You know, when I'm working with someone who's considering whether they should leave a hijack call, I have them go through all the assets that they have and find out whose name are things in. Because I've had too much experience in this realm. You know, I've been doing this work for 30 years, and I've had too much experience knowing that a hijacker could go in and charm a new person in the bank and get your name taken off something. They'll tell them a story about, oh, you're on your deathbed and you can't sign anything, and you ask them to come in and take your name off the house. And then it happens. It's not supposed to happen. It's not supposed to be able to happen, but it happens. These things they happen. So we have to know that people will lie about very important things, and that's emotionally abusive. Or how about the person who makes fun of other people? They're a very high level person in her own mind on the internet. I think everybody's pretty equal, but she's done well for sure. And one day I could not believe that she took a photograph. She was at lunch. She took a photograph of some woman she didn't know. And the woman had very large breasts, and the breasts were resting on the table, and she was leaning in talking to somebody. And she posted that woman's picture on Facebook and made a derogatory comment about it. I mean, who does that? That's like the hugest red flag. Like at that moment, I realized that, okay, all the little things that I knew didn't add up for me, there, look at that. She was willing to make fun of how other people looked or spoke or dressed or whatever. Just that fast, she was willing to make fun of them and put it on Facebook. And what was it to do? So that she would be the one who says, look what I noticed. I wrote to her. I said, you know, I used the personal weather report. I said, I would feel devastated if someone I didn't know took a photograph of me and put it on Facebook without my permission and then went on to make a derogatory comment. And you know what? She didn't write back. That was telling too. So it's important for us to realize that if you see somebody making fun of other people, maybe you're dating and somebody starts making fun of or making comments about or whatever, store that red flag in there. That's not good. Definitely not good. Or what's another way of emotional abuse? They try and keep you away from people you care about. They try and pull you away from your family or take you away from your friends. I had a client whose partner moved her into the middle of nowhere and then took away her car. She was totally isolated. No car. He controlled the money. Now he had her away from her family and friends. What was she to do? So difficult. Or another emotionally abusive thing that parents will do is tell you that you are too much trouble. You know, I've had so many people say to me, well, you know, my partner will say to me, well, look at you. I mean, I put up with you, but nobody else would want you. So it's a good thing I keep you around because you would be destitute out there and nobody would be interested in you for a moment. You're just too much trouble. You're not good enough for anybody else. Emotionally abusive. Or they criticize you, or they treat you with a lack of respect. I mean, all these things are emotionally abusive. They give you orders. Like a parent, a bad parent, giving you orders. You know, funny story. I was taking care of my mother when she was really ill, and she said to me one day, she said, go downstairs and get that bucket. And I said, pardon? And she said, go downstairs and get that bucket. I said, pardon? And she just looked at me and she said it again, go downstairs and get that bucket. And I said, you know, Mom, I don't take orders from anybody. I'm an adult. I'm not in the military. I don't take orders from anyone. And she sat there and she seethed and she fumed. And then finally she said, "Go downstairs and get that bucket, please." And I went and got the bucket. But remember, you're 100% responsible for teaching people how to treat you when you become an adult. But all the stuff that got put in there before you became that adult is lurking in there, and it could sabotage you, or it could make it so that you are being emotionally abused, and you need to know that. So Purple Belt said, "I think I came out of the fog when my empath dad finally validated my childhood memories my hijackal mother denied." Great. Really good. Yes, that's very clarifying when you find out that somebody else who could see it too. I am an only child, so there was nobody to corroborate what went on in my home. So I can understand exactly how that felt. Great. Kristen says, "Yes, my spouse doesn't give me all the information or suddenly is literal when it works in his favor. He also is very vague, and when I ask for a specific answer, he keeps giving me the vague answer." Power, 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 power. Yeah. When you have a spouse like that, you have to go into the personal weather report mode, and you have to stop pushing. Because you've got big decisions to make, Kristen, if this fellow behaves like this all the time. Don't put your sail in his wind. Just don't do it. Because an example for children is always being set. And they're always watching us. They're always watching how we respond to our partners to us. They're always watching. So we can't take that stuff sitting down. We can't. We have to learn how to speak our truth in a neutral way, but in an assertive way. Very important. Anya said, "Oh, I heard it a lot. My most recent boyfriend would say, 'Your cat is too much trouble. No one will want to deal with it.'" There you go. Nobody would want you because of your cat. Aren't you lucky I'm here? Yeah. It's such a sideways thing to do. And it's so erroneous. I mean, the answer to that is, "Oh, I know lots of men who like cats." Right? I mean, tell the truth. There are lots of men who like cats. So, it has nothing to do with men in general. It has something to do with you wanting power over me. So the answer is, oh, lots of men have cats. So where do you want to go with that conversation, guy? All right. Kristen, also my spouse will tell me things he was going to do for me, but now he isn't because somehow I ruined the surprise. That is so passive aggressive. That is just dirty pool. It is nasty, and it's what hijackals do. So everything has to be your fault. And there you have an example of emotional abuse. Everything has to be your fault. You are always wrong. You can't be right. Except in that little moment when they want something and they love bomb you. And then it's right back to you being at the bottom of the pile, right? So Kristen says, "I'll check out that book." Yes, do check it out. Kaizen for Couples. Kaizen for Couples. Purple Belt. Kristen, ditto, vague, never straight answer. That way it was always my fault. Yes, they love to do vague answers. I wanted to respond to that, so I'm glad you repeated it, Purple Belt. Yeah, they love vague answers because then you can't pin them down. And they don't want to be pinned down because being pinned down means they don't have any control. So they like the big, broad answers, So you say, let's go and take the kids to the merry-go-round this weekend. And they'll go, "Oh, that sounds good." Now, there's a male-female difference in the way we communicate, but thinking about the hijackal, that sounds good. You think that he is now interested in doing that. No, There was no commitment in that at all. There was no decision. There was no anything. It was just like, just fog. You know, oh, that sounds good. I'm sure the kids would like that. But we don't have a plan. We have no commitment to doing it. He didn't say he would like to go. He just thought the activity was a good idea. And that's the way they kind of white out the conversation. That makes sense? Yes. And so therefore it always will be your fault because they're not ever going to take responsibility. Yes, he doesn't have to take responsibility for anything when he can be totally vague. And this is the way that they roll. And they love to twist things. You know, that twisting is very emotionally abusing. You know, you say something and they say it 45 degrees away from where it was and they swear it's true and it's not true. And that's when you have to speak up. When you have to speak up and say, no, I remember it this way. Just be assertive. It's you. You remember it. They can remember it any way they want, but be assertive. Quietly, neutrally assertive. That's not the way I remember it. That's not what I said. Or I recognize this as the truth. Whatever it is, just be very, very clear. So all of these pieces about emotional abuse, if they happened to you when you were young, then just because you were used to them, it then becomes much easier for you to let slip or let go by or accept further emotional abuse when you're older. And you know, my great desire is to help people recognize it and learn how to not accept it. Right? To understand that you deserve to take up space and draw breath. And therefore, you deserve to say what you think, feel, need, and want. And you deserve to have the relational gifts that I talk about in Kaizen for couples. Honesty, safety, trust, respect, and reliability. Those are cornerstones of healthy relationships. And then there are the other three: equality, reciprocity, and mutuality. Any relationship that you have has to be based on that for it to be healthy. And if these things are not present, or were not present in your home, or not present in your early life, and you see that they're not present in your life now or in the relationships you're creating, then know that you need to make a shift, and you can. You can. You know, I was with a client today, and he said, we were just ending 8 sessions, and he said, you may not know how deeply you've changed my thinking. He's 62 years old, and he said, you may not know how deeply you've changed my thinking. Very deep thinker, so I'm sure that, you know, he sat back and he took in what he learned each session, and he was telling me, and then he said, and I'm going to work with you more, which was wonderful. Right? Because when we get some forward momentum and we get some of the weight off us of emotional baggage and emotional abuse, we begin to see the sun every now and again, and pretty soon we can live where the sun's coming out. That's great emotionally for us. That's where we want to be. We want to create our reality, not accept other people's. And we don't want to get caught in the trap of living up to the expectations of other people. We do that when we're children, but then we have to do it very wisely and with self-awareness when we're adults. Do you want to be living up to the expectations of other adults? I hope you want to live up to your expectations of yourself, and that they're well thought out, and that you spend time with yourself and help yourself figure that out. You know, one of the things that I ask people to do is an exercise I created called the Value Shuffle. You have to know what's important to you so you can predicate your life on it. So Kristen said, classic example. He does that, and then when the day comes, he's going off doing something else. This is the merry-go-round, I think. The day comes, he's going off doing something else, so I'm working on just doing it anyway. I've camped twice with my son alone because he didn't want to. Well, great. You know what's great about that? Is that your son has great memories of a great mom who was fun and went camping. And his memory will be that Dad didn't show up. And I hope you made no excuses for Dad. Didn't even mention Dad, except if your son did. And then just say, oh, well, Dad had other things to do. And then you just have a joyful, fun time. Because when you're building memories with your son like that, Kristen, your son appreciates that, and he begins to see that you are safe. And he feels the distance from his father, even though he's yearning to have the approval and interest of his father, the attention of his father. He begins, as his brain development comes along, when he gets the parietal and prefrontal lobe developments, he will begin to be able to be capable of rational linear thought, and he'll figure it out. Okay, this is the pattern at my house. Mom suggests something fun, and Dad bails, and then Mom and I go do something fun. That's pretty much the equation. And so I was so glad that you went anyway. Yes, Purple Belt. Again, I started doing things with no waiting around and no anger. That is the perfect solution. You are not going to impinge on my life. You are not going to take away my joy. You are not going to curtail the things that are of interest to me, the things I value, the things I want to share with my family. No, we'll do it anyway. Now, what often happens with the hijackal in that case is either they go and find other supply because you're no fun, or they can't stand their children not thinking they're great, so they start becoming Disneyland dad or mom. They want to one-up you. Well, you went camping for 2 nights with your mom? I'm going to take you for 2 weeks to Disneyland, But hopefully that won't happen. Kristen said, I know that breaks my heart, but if I can't be the safe and consistent, if I can be the safe and consistent one, then I'll keep doing what I'm doing. Good for you. That is the wise, mature, intelligent response to it. You do not want to get into some emotional tug of war or have your son feel it. Just have your son's best interest at heart, his well-being at heart, and do what brings you to joy. And don't talk about Dad unless he wants to talk about Dad. And then talk about it at the age-appropriate language. And only answer his direct questions. That's the best way to deal with the children. And Kristen says, good for you, Purple Belt, but hard but necessary. Yes. Okay, there you go. So you can tell I've done this for a while. Purple Belt said, yeah, both happened. Disney Sports Dad and New Supply. Yeah, that's what they do. So let's not expect them to be any different. They're not going to be any different. They're not going to change. I had someone ask me in one of my groups the other day, well, my narcissistic hijackal came and told me, we've been separated for 6 months, told me that he's been to therapy, he's going to church, he has all these things, and could he please come home? He's a changed man. What should I do? I said, oh, that's lovely. You tell him, oh, I'm so glad to hear that. So I want to feel really safe and secure that that is the truth. So let's go to counseling for 6 months, every week or 2. And when that time is up, then we'll be able to make a decision as to whether or not we could consider being in a relationship again. Okay, if this person is so wise and has changed so much, that will be the paying of what has to happen in order to get the relationship back. But if the person is a hijackal, they'll go once or twice. They won't like the therapist, and they won't like any therapist. The therapist will always be wrong because they don't agree with him or her. And then they will have reasons why they can't go, and then pretty soon it's don't you be harping at me to go, and I can't be around this nagging, and they will have shown you that the therapy or the church or whatever it is that they thought was the magic bullet that would have you take them back really did not make an impact. So these things happen, and it's sad. But if that's the situation you're in, then you got to deal the cards you have. And so one of the things you do is to be the age-appropriate parent who teaches the children to be the way you most want them to be. Valued and validated and they have fun and things are age appropriate. And I can't say that often enough, because hijackal parents will make their kid into a confidant. And I had someone who started complaining about their partner to their 10-year-old, and it was like the mother and the 10-year-old were married. It was a 10-year-old boy, and were ganged up against the father. Totally inappropriate. Totally not age appropriate. Made that little boy into a mini adult, and that child could not regain his childhood. Just wrong, wrong, wrong. Okay, so we're coming to the end of our time, and I'm so glad that you participated and shared your thoughts. I hope this was helpful to you, and that you recognize and take some time for yourself. Take some time every day to sit with a journal, or and have a cup of tea, herbal tea, and think about it. What did happen to me in my youth? Purple Belt. Ali Marful. Yes, their dad behaved in all the ways you described. Now we're divorced, and he uses my parenting style and activities with the child. He stole my persona. Well, he wants to look and be like you so he can say he was like you. As long as your children win, great. As long as your children are getting the best of both of you, thumbs up. Let him do what he does. Purple Belt, you sure do get this. My story is changed man and going to counseling. Yeah. Super sad. Yes, it is. So have a little thought about, where were there emotional abuse in your childhood that you might not have thought about? And is it playing out in any way in your adult life? And what has it to do with being attracted to the difficult person that is currently in your life? Because you'll begin to see how those things meshed and came together. And I certainly hope that you will do that, because it would be very insightful for you. It's an important thing to do. So I wish you well, and I look forward to talking with you next week. I'm not sure what the topic will be, but you will be able to see it on Monday. So in the meantime, take good care and remember to behave as though you matter, because you do.